There was an eclipse up in the sky that humans were transforming under the serene light. People's skin and flesh were turning into grasses and wood. Metal was overflowing from human bones. There was still a place filled with ease and comfort under the crazy and spreading crisis. Lai Chengyan asked himself why he was explaining the situation with a carefree attitude. He asked himself if he was not afraid of being attacked by the Darksiders because he was also transformed and it was into a piece of land. He was wondering why she was transformed into that since other people were transformed to be human, as he can't be able to go anywhere again. The happenings continued and people kept getting transformed, leaving everyone in groaning. The guy was lonely as no one could detect his existence. His perception of himself changed and was also degenerated, as if he was truly going to become a piece of land. He just lay down as he thought it was no different from death. Luluo, who was running, saw that the monsters were everywhere. She asked herself if there were any normal humans around. She kept running as she was seen blown by the wind, revealing her underwear. Lai Chengyan could vividly see this. She fell. Lai Chengyan kept having one of the great desires of humans bursting in his heart, which was the proof of being alive. He said the feeling kept reminding him that he was still human. Luluo found the monsters in front of her while she was still on the floor with them making different sounds. She kept screaming. Lai Chengyan, who was transformed into a piece of land, interrupted and shunned them for shouting on his body without his permission. He told them that they were not allowed to touch a normal human being. This led to a serious struggle between the monsters and the guy transformed into a piece of land. He said to himself that even if he couldn't feel any pain, they could shatter him, knowing the fact that he was in a fight with a dark side who was transformed into a dead tree and one who was transformed into steel reinforcing bars. He thought within him that he needed to be more prudent in dealing with them. He took the Luluo up by the wind and placed her below the soil. She said to herself that the soil was behaving like quicksand and was covering her. She wondered if the soil could be protecting her. Lai Chengyan arose and said that the land doesn't speak and doesn't attract attention, but that didn't mean he had no temper. He affirmed that that was his territory and he was the territory. He was ready to fight the monsters, facing them. He told the dark side that they had no idea how thick and heavy the land could be. The two dark sides attacked him, piercing him with their steel and wood. He thought to himself that dealing with them, shifting the weight of the land could be enough. He shifted it, and the Darksiders lost their stand and balance, and were thrown into the air with the land cracking. He said since he was the land himself, burying them should also be his duty, but the person he saved should leave there first before he could do anything, since no one could detect him anyway. He squatted and was saying to himself that he needed to recall that feeling of being human again. Luo crawled to where he was and asked him if he was the one who saved her. With his eyes widely opened, he was amazed that the lady could see him. He asked if she could see him, but the lady made him understand that she wasn't seeing him, but could feel him, stating that there was a thick and heavy sense of security that he was right there. Still marveled, he held her hands and asked if she could stay there and live on his body. The lady was amazed. He introduced himself and told the lady that he was passing through that place when the transformation occurred and he was turned into a piece of land itself. He gave the lady reasons for her to stay. His reasons were that he still had the intellect of a human, could protect her, and it was most likely for her to come across the dark side if she was alone. He later admitted that all he was saying was just excuses, but the most vital thing was that he found the reason to continue living. Still holding her hands, he said he had to fight for the reason to stay, and he needed her by his side. Luluo couldn't understand all he was saying, so he made it clear that he would raise and support her. Luluo, introducing herself, said she understood all he said, and to be sincere, she had nowhere to go if she was going to hide from those monsters. Delightfully, Lai Chengyan immediately stood up, held her hands, and said that was good, and that he would find a shelter that is not easy to run into dark sides. While they kept going, noticing his hands, Luluo widened her eyes when she saw his hands becoming dry. She asked if it was okay. Lai Chengyan was also wondering what could be happening as he noticed the feeling that something was being sucked out of his body. A tree asked who it was. Was it a dark side he had not seen before? Lai Chengyan, overcome by exhaustion, teeters on the brink of fainting. Lu, concerned, inquires about his well-being. He responds, his voice strained, explaining the sensation of his strength being drained away. With determination, he points in a specific direction, convinced that something is actively siphoning his energy. Lu Luo, struck by a sudden idea, hesitates, uncertain of its validity. Lai Chengyan, intrigued, prompts her to share her thoughts. Lu Luo, without explanation, inserts her 2 fingers into Chengyan's mouth. He is taken aback, questioning the reality of the situation. A flurry of thoughts race through his mind as he contemplates the unexpectedness of having a peer's fingers in his mouth. As if by some miraculous intervention, Lai Chengyan experiences a sudden surge of healing and rejuvenation due to Lu Luo's unconventional method. Confusion clouds his mind as he struggles to comprehend the inexplicable turn of events. Lu Luo, seizing the moment, reveals the surprising source of his recovery fertilizers. She explains, albeit hastily, that her expertise stems from being a student at the nearby agricultural university. In her flight to safety, she had the foresight to carry along supplies, never anticipating their life-saving potential. Lu Luo expresses gratitude to Chengyan for retrieving the fertilizers, revealing that she lost most of them during her frantic escape. Chengyan, perplexed, contemplates the significance of the recovered items. Carbamide, he muses to himself, recalling that it's something agriculture students typically employ as makeshift luggage. The irony of its transformation from a mere accessory to a life-saving resource isn't lost on him. Chengyan, touched by Lu Luo's humility, interjects, "No, it is I who should be thanking you." He gazes at her with newfound admiration. "You are truly my fated lucky star," he declares, acknowledging the serendipitous role she has played in his recovery and their shared journey. Suddenly, Chengyan's body begins to tremble once more, indicating that the problem persists. Urgently, he informs Lu Luo that they must swiftly locate the source of his affliction. Together, they venture into the depths of the forest in search of answers. As they delve deeper, their eyes fall upon a striking purple flower. Chengyan's intuition kicks in as he senses its malevolent energy, confirming his suspicions that it is the culprit behind his weakening state. Lu Luo's astonishment is palpable as she confesses that she has never encountered a plant like this during her studies. The notion that plants could harbor such sinister intentions leaves her bewildered. Chengyan, his mind racing with possibilities, acknowledges the plausibility of plants becoming Darksiders. However, he shares Lu Luo's confusion regarding the plant's capability to drain his energy, questioning how a single stalk could have such a profound effect on him, a vast expanse of land. Chengyan, determined to neutralize the threat, activates his suction ability to draw the potion from the plant. However, to his dismay, the plant begins to grow exponentially before his eyes. He watches in shock as massive tumors sprout from its roots, a grotesque manifestation of its newfound vitality. Even more alarming is the strength of the roots, which withstand the might of the land's power, thwarting Chengyan's attempts to destroy them. Lu Luo's revelation brings a moment of clarity amidst the chaos. "That's rhizobium," she exclaims, recognizing the symbiotic relationship between the plant and the bacteria. "It appears to be a leguminous plant." She explains that rhizobium aids leguminous plants in absorbing nitrogen from the atmosphere, fostering a mutually beneficial partnership. Chengyan's eyes widen as he comprehends the formidable nature of their adversary, realizing that conventional methods may not be sufficient to overcome it. As Chengyan gazes at the sun veiled by the moon, a metaphor for the overshadowing threat before him, a sense of helplessness washes over him. He realizes that even if he were to cease providing nutrients to the plant, it would become self-sufficient, sustained by its symbiotic relationship with rhizobium. The revelation that the roots are impervious to the land's power intensifies his dilemma. Faced with this formidable adversary, Chengyan is left grappling with a daunting question: what is he to do now? As the plant's roots lunge towards Chengyan, he narrowly evades their grasp, his reflexes saving him from harm. However, to his horror, the plant seizes a nearby deceased creature instead. Luluo, observing the macabre scene, questions whether the plant is attempting to absorb the bodies of the Darksiders. Chengyan shakes his head in response, his expression grave. "No," he murmurs, "it seems to be something that eludes the perception of ordinary individuals." Suddenly, the plant's head begins to emit eerie noises, and crimson glowing eyes emerge from its depths. In a horrifying transformation, it morphs into a monstrous creature, its form twisted and contorted by the darkness surrounding it. Chengyan and Luluo stare in disbelief as the once innocuous plant now stands before them as a true embodiment of terror. As the monstrous plant launches its attack towards Luluo, Chengyan instinctively rushes to her defense, placing himself between her and the impending danger. With a swift and forceful motion, the plant's projectile pierces Chengyan's chest, causing searing pain to radiate through his body. Gasping for breath, he grapples with the intensity of the wound, awestruck by the plant's formidable penetrating power. Thoughts whirl through his mind as he contemplates the plant's strength, pondering whether its ability to restrain and harm him surpasses even that of the human Darksiders encountered before. Could it be that plants inherently possess such destructive capabilities, capable of effortlessly subduing even the power of the land itself? With a terrifying strength, the plant hoists Chengyan into the air, its sinister intentions clear as it commands Luluo to flee. Despite the pain from his injuries, Chengyan remains resolute, his determination unwavering. As Luluo hesitates, witnessing Chengyan's plight, he reassures her with a strained voice, urging her to escape while he distracts the plant. With a surge of courage, Chengyan seizes one of the plant's tumors, gritting his teeth against the pain as he prepares to buy precious moments for Luluo to flee to safety. Chengyan's voice cuts through the chaos, firm and resolute. "Go, Luluo, this is my fight," he insists, his gaze unwavering despite the pain. "If I drag you into this, how can I speak of protecting you or of a future together?" His words carry the weight of his determination to shield her from harm, even as he faces the monstrous plant alone. With a final glance, he implores her to escape, knowing that their shared dreams can only be realized if she remains safe. Luluo clenches her fists defiantly as Chengyan confronts the monstrous plant. "Don't underestimate the attacks of a dark side," he warns, urging her to action. As the plant lunges towards her, Luluo reacts swiftly, hurling a liquid at its roots. With a sizzle and a hiss, the roots ignite, causing the plant to recoil in pain. Observing the plant's reaction, Luluo reflects on her limited knowledge of Darkside, but recognizes the potent absorbing ability possessed by plants. With a determined smirk, she taunts the plant, "How about a taste of herbicide? This is the undiluted original solution." As the plant's roots dissolve into nothingness and it collapses to the ground, a strange phenomenon unfolds. Tears stream from its eyes, an unexpected display of emotion from a creature of darkness. Chengyan, his body racked with pain, witnesses the plant's reaction and muses aloud. "Has it lost its will to fight?" Luluo remarks to Chengyan, "It seems Toot Toot has surrendered." Chengyan, taken aback, raises an eyebrow in surprise at the unexpected choice of name. Toot Toot, a moniker so whimsical for a creature of darkness, leaves him momentarily stunned, a testament to the peculiarities of their shared experiences. Luluo gestures towards the plant, now offering its fruit, a gesture that seems almost pleading. "Look," she observes softly, "it's even offering up its fruit. It's as if it's saying, 'You can have my fruit, please don't hurt me.'" Chengyan questions, "How can you know its thoughts? It's a dark side." Luluo approaches the plant, admitting uncertainty. "I'm not sure, but maybe it's because I've always enjoyed spending time with plants," she reflects. "Compared to the Darksiders we've encountered, its intentions seem clearer to me." The plant offers a gentle smile and bows graciously to Luluo, initiating a playful interaction between them. As they engage in their newfound camaraderie, Chengyan watches in astonishment. It appears that Lu Luo's assessment holds true faced with the threat of extinction. Even a creature of darkness like Toot Toot begins to exhibit human-like manners, a startling transformation that challenges Chengyan's understanding of their world. Lu Luo remarks with a touch of humor. Speaking of which, these aren't fruits, they're stem tubers. Do you think Toot Toot transformed from a potato into a monster? Her playful observation adds a light-hearted tone to the situation, prompting a moment of laughter amidst the strange and unexpected events. As Lu Luo begins to cut the stem tuber, she contemplates, this one doesn't seem to have any herbicide on it. Oblivious to the danger, she takes a bite. Behind her, Chengyan's expression darkens with shock and concern. It's poisonous, he exclaims, his voice filled with urgency, realizing the potential danger she has unknowingly put herself in. Lu Luo reassures Chengyan, it's edible, just needs cooking. Chengyan insists she alert him if she feels unwell, ready to take action if needed. Lu Luo responds, I only tasted a bit to confirm, didn't swallow it. Her clarification eases Chengyan's worry, relieved that she took caution. Lu Luo addresses the plant, her tone gentle yet firm. Another thing, Toot, she begins. You can't absorb the nutrients in the ground so aggressively. You can only absorb them if Lai Chengyan agrees. We need to cooperate harmoniously. Her words carry a sense of diplomacy, emphasizing the need for mutual understanding and cooperation between them. Chengyan wonders if this counts as successful taming. Chengyan queries the plant about what it had absorbed from the Darksiders' bodies. It seems to be some kind of dark-colored. Let's call it a dark element, he concludes, noting the ominous nature of the substance. As the plant begins to form a dark side circle, Chengyan's suspicions are confirmed. It is a dark side circle, he acknowledges grimly. Without hesitation, he reaches out to touch it, but to his shock, the contact pierces his arm with a deafening noise erupting around them. Before investigating the approaching presence, Chengyan's attention is drawn back to the plant's query about the dark element's taste. Momentarily taken aback by the question, he contemplates, is the dark element tasty? Meanwhile, a nagging thought niggles at him. Can he understand the plants now growing on him? Could this newfound ability be linked to the dark element's influence? As Chengyan listens to the plant's explanation about the dark element, absorbing its ominous implications, a sudden movement catches his attention. With dread creeping in, he turns around just in time to see a creature with red eyes emerging behind him. Before he can react, the creature launches itself towards Chengyan, poised to attack. Before the creature can reach Chengyan, he swiftly hurls several roots into its body, immobilizing it. Turning to Lu Luo, Chengyan reassures her. Don't worry, the plant already informed me about the dark side, and the control and power of the land have noticeably increased. With a determined resolve, he channels this newfound strength, shaping the earth beneath them into a grave for the defeated Darksiders. Chengyan observes the changes in his body and remarks, indeed, the dark element is present inside all Darksiders. Returning to his normal form, he continues, even if they are killed, the dark element doesn't disappear right away. His words carry a weight of understanding, hinting at the lingering influence of the darkness even in death. Chengyan confides in Lu Luo, if I continue harnessing the power of the dark elements, I can become even stronger. This might give us a better chance of survival. His words reveal a calculated acceptance of the darkness as a means to gain strength in their ongoing struggle for survival. Lu Luo expresses her concern for Chengyan's well-being, relieved to see him unharmed. She admits that when she saw him in a daze, she feared Toot had attacked him. The plant, referring to Lu Luo as the strange woman, observes her lack of fear towards Darksiders. Lu Luo, affectionately petting the plant, suggests that her comfort with the situation may stem from her upbringing, spent playing in the soil and becoming familiar with farm life. This familiarity has perhaps cultivated a deeper understanding and acceptance of the world around her. Join us on our journey through the realms of adventure and discovery. Subscribe now for captivating stories, thrilling encounters, and insightful revelations. Welcome to our community, where imagination knows no bounds. Let's explore together. Toot Toot proposed the idea of sharing darkish elements with Lecheng Yin so they may coexist. The little flower is already on par with human beings inside the intelligence branch. Maybe it's as it already absorbed plenty of juice from Darksiders. Tut Toot does not like being touched, even though Chang'an accredited the coexistence plan, since he also has extra manage over the vitamins on his floor now. But before that, he needed to realize something first. He asked Toot Toot where the tiny ball of dark detail got here from in advance. It without delay replied that it came from the light, like it became commonplace experience underneath the perpetual shine of the eclipse within the sky. There may be lots of mild to go around. The duo becomes only understanding now that the eclipse had something to do with this mysterious dark detail. He straightaway advised Lulu to speedy cover inside the coloration of a tree far away from mild. Fortuitously, she had been staying in the shadows while on the run. If this became the case, the transformation of humanity changed into no longer only a unmarried incidence. It was a consistent occurrence. It really has been taking place even now. That mysterious everlasting eclipse is the important thing to information the apocalypse and the life of the strength source for the dark side's developing power. Lulu has been getting increasingly more conversant in the existence of residing on top of Leung Yin. She has been exploring the land itself and the encircling regions round it. Nowadays, she become excited to deliver him into a place where traces of cultivation from earlier than had remained. Lang Yin become now not doing so warm, though. He become nonetheless no longer familiar with dwelling lifestyles as the land itself. Toot Toot has been tagging together with the duo anywhere. The flower has seen soil being washed away. However, it's now not each day that you see a bit of land shifting. Also, he is getting pretty irritated that this plant turned into the use of him as its ride. Although he were given transformed right into a first-rate sized piece of land. He ought to only walk round a constrained vicinity. And he would get blocked through a mysterious obstruction. If he desires to depart the limited range, he'll have to slowly and manually push his soil out and spread it ahead. The places that he circulates through will then get assimilated as a part of him. Lulo has been left in charge of studying the encompassing land. The spot they picked nowadays has decent soil, exceptional safe terrain, and there is an reachable source of water they can faucet into. She was decided to make this perimeter into the lengthy time period safe haven of the institution. Le Chunjin smiled. The younger female positive knows her stuff. There is no motive to doubt her judgment at all. So he agreed. Abruptly, he began sensing something peculiar nearby. A speck of red light has connected itself to Lulo. It changed into so small, almost imperceptible. It's a tiny particle of dark element. He gently took the fragment out of her blouse and reminded her that there is not sufficient safety from the sunlight. Lulu ought to be cognizant to now not stray too a ways away from him. That is on the center in their agreement, in spite of everything. Lin Yin would not want to peer her rework right into a monster like him due to the darkish element. She got flustered after hearing that. Lulu does now not like it whilst he refers to himself as a monster. He has constantly been a human in her eyes. Toot Toot simply quietly watched the weird human interaction, no longer understanding the subtext of what the two had been announcing. You cannot count on a leguminous plant to realize human emotions. Lulo awkwardly modified the challenge and presented the seeds that she thinks ought to pass at the floor first in her materials. Those are the valuable rapid-growing edible vegetation. Securing a supply of food is one of the most essential things to do to live to tell the tale. After planting the seeds, may be left for Le Chen Yin to attend to. He took the seeds to his hand and began coating them with a mild quantity of darkish element. Our boy has been expanding himself slowly, changing the land below his toes. But before having full manipulate over this land, testing out agriculture on himself might come first. Even though they had been just seeds, he should sense their desire to grow and grow in appropriate conditions. It becomes similar to before upon absorbing darkish elements. He began to understand the notion of vegetation. Still, it's unexpected that it'd work on seeds too. Moreover, it is nonetheless a mystery. But he appears to have the ability to immediately bring his mind to plants too. After bathing the seeds with darkish detail, they started out germinating right in the palm of his fingers. Lulu changed into stun to peer that the growth becomes so fast. They simply planted it a few moments ago, and it's already showing signs and symptoms of existence. Also, Ling Yin would not sense extraordinary at all, so this approach must be all properly. His concept was that once soaking up a first-rate amount of dark detail, he became able to awaken this innate capability for experimentation's sake. He used up all of his stored darkish detail and transformed it right into a strength that will increase plant boom. He did all of it intuitively. All of a surprising, Toot Toot changed into trying to get his attention. He had no concept what turned into happening. It turned out that the flower just desired a few nurturing contact. Li Chingin wasn't completely opposed to the idea of that. But except Toot Toot completely listens to his orders, the flower may want to preserve on dreaming. There may be no such factor as free lunch, and there is additionally no such component as loose nurturing. It bowed once again. This flower Darksider can really adapt to anything conditions it goes via. The primary time that Lulu saw Toot Toot, she already felt that this aspect should recognize human nature. For the reason that eclipse has brought along the emergence of darkish detail, Licheng Yin has been on a challenge to spread out his land, exercise growth, land mass, and take in dark elements. The power from the darkish offers him a consistent supply of unique power, a type of electricity that can be transformed into superb outcomes through this wonderfully virtuous cycle. Ling Chen Yin managed to cultivate a successful farmland. This became the most blissful factor that came about to him after his risk come upon with Lulu. He says that to himself, but deep inner, he knew that this changed into not anything but self-motivation. Inside the center of an apocalypse, some other idea came to thoughts. If his land can defend people, then he'll additionally be able to have a taste of his preceding human existence. Deep interior, Licheng Yin simply desired to show return to a ordinary human on this contemporary global of monsters and mutations. Maybe a method to turn lower back time exists. Those are lofty ideas though. Tut has been tailing him non-stop considering they first were given delivered. He asked the flower if it does not like being collectively with its personal kind. In place of answering, Tut Toot just alarmed him to the truth that there may be a close-by pastime coming from people. Actual human beings like Lulu. Of route, Lin Yin become taken aback. This became large news. However, Tut Toot additionally referred to that there is a massive organization of darkish detail holders within the place, and they may be transferring. The human activity stated become coming from a group of 3 people. Fleeing through the woods, getting chased through Darksiders. This darkish cider isn't always one I would love to debris with. It has evolved to have numerous protrusions product of sharp blades all over its frame. The people were starting to experience fatigue. They have been going for walks for his or her lives for a long time now. However, screaming and whining will handiest trap out even more Darksiders. A reliable searching man led the organization of 3. He blamed the crimson-haired lady Lu Fang Yuan for insisting on coming again to find Lulu after receiving a distress message. Qing Wen, the dependable man, became quite insensitive. But he has a point. Glass's nerd boy become beginning to gradual down. The blade darkish cider was already hot in his literal heels and remaining in faster and quicker. Then he made a mistake. Glasses appeared behind him and became fearful by using the possibility of getting reduced and diced into minced meat. A short-term distraction made the darkish cider swing its blade, but it fortunately missed Glass Boy's leg via an inch. The first swipe did not land, but the subsequent one might because Glass Boy has tripped and planted his face into the floor. Chung Jun, the Glass Boy, became pretty lots completed for at that point. His pal couldn't probable do whatever to help him. Right, because the blade darkish cider lunges forward to do its component. Chung Jun become already announcing his prayers. As he become positive that this became it, Hunes in reality completed for. Lung Yuan and Qinggan watched helplessly as their friend became about to knock on heaven's door. However, simply because the tip of the blade was about to carve up the nerd's face, it stopped. In truth, the Darksiders' entire frame has been frozen. It became its head to the aspect after sensing the only chargeable for preventing the blade. Le Chongyan quietly manipulated the land to seize a preserve onto the monster's leg. He additionally overheard the humans mentioning Lulo earlier. Maybe they've some type of connection to the younger lady. There is best one way to discover. He needs to keep them. Our boy Li Chengyin held the blade Darksiders by using its toes firmly, giving Nerd Boy the opportunity to get lower back far from the lethal facet. His comrades have been vain as hell. The blade Darksiders attempted to show its unpleasant spider-looking face around to see just who turned into protecting him in area, even as muttering gibberish, whilst the monster fails to look who is preserving him returned within the limitations of human sight. He rotates his head in a complete 180 angle, like he become in an exorcism movie. Doing so allowed him to spot the embodiment of the land they have been standing on. Le Chen Yin, the Darksider, right away shifted consciousness to attack him. The use of blades with reckless abandon. He noticed the assault coming from a mile away, but he did now not hassle dodging or doing something fancy to defend against the end of the weapon. Liang Yin chose to get some facts by means of staring at the monster's conduct as an alternative. Through his knowledgeable guess, this component shouldn't have the functionality to communicate, for it is the one standing on his frame. But now not best does it no longer make an apology. It's even attacking him with a confident smile. But Chongyin determined that he have to educate this Darksider a touch lesson. It's far only honest considering the fact that that is his literal domestic ground. The usage of only a single thought, he made the floor that the monster turned into status on crumble into itself, growing a respectable-sized sinkhole. This is one way that Li Chengyin can manage his land body from the human being's angle. The Darksiders just rushed inside the opposite path and attacked the empty air, only to get caught by means of a freak accident. At least they had been secure even though. Only a second ago Nerd Boy notioned that he was going to die a gruesome demise, maimed by Darksiders blades. However, he became stored by a landslide that got here out of nowhere. The crimson-haired girl Lu Fang Yuan began sending something unusual from afar. So she interestingly seemed with lively enthusiasm and pleasure. She pointed to the alternative aspect of a cliff where smoke was billowing toward the skies. If there may be a smoke signal visible from the vicinity, they're presently standing on it need to be ignited via survivors from their faculty. Hell, it might also be Lulo herself. So the trio just found their subsequent prevent, composing themselves. They took some other trek in the direction of the smoke. Toot Toot, the flower, carefully watched them stroll off. He grew to become to the aspect to look Le Changyin returned from coping with the monster that threatened the group. He simply casually buried the Darksiders deep inside the ground, never to be seen again. Toot Toot become curious as to why Mr. Landlord became letting Lulu get in touch with her own type with humans. At the moment, determining to cut up nutrients among many people might not be the neatest pass. But Liang Yin become nicely aware that people are not solitary creatures. He could recognize he become one too just a little bit in the past. If there may be a choice, humans will want to form corporations and live together. Moreover, it's been a while for the reason that Eclipse began and modified the order of things. Remoted within the deep wooded regions, they have no idea what the contemporary kingdom of the outside global is. The statistics that these human beings preserve concerning what's taking place within the grand scheme of things concerns Le Chen Yin's group as well. Talking of agencies, Lulu has subsequently reunited together with her buddies. Toot Toot was just concerned at the opportunity of those people trying to combat for his or her nutrients. If that occurs, what do they even do? Not everybody could have a good dating with every other, like Toot Toot and Lu. Additionally, called his tumors. Li Cheng assured the eccentric flower that there may be no want to be afraid, for he won't hesitate whilst the time comes to do so, regardless of who or what the risk might be. The Lady Lung Yuan couldn't take her fingers off Lulu, hugging her tightly and celebrating the truth that her friend changed into fine. She changed into so scared after they lost contact. All of a sudden, Lulu had to calm the E-lady down, as she's been hugging her for goodbye and so tightly now. Lu Feng Yuan became simply satisfied that Chinan and Chung Jun had been willing to come along with her to this aspect of the mountains. If she departed alone, she wouldn't have been able to discover her green-haired friend. Chin Sniddle commented that Lulu just controlled to stay alive on my own because of a few form of miracle. Chen Jun becomes simply amazed that she managed to construct a first-rate refuge, as though she became planning to hide in this place for a long term. Mr. Buzzkill Chin asserted that hiding here for a long term simply might not do. Only some minutes ago, they ran into a darkish cider and nearly got worn out. He was positive that this land changed into now not secure in any respect. He desires Lulu to comply with the institution to the civil defense military fortification inside the town, in which there are lots of assets to head round for every survivor. Without the military fortification protective the final people, they could as properly be free meat to be hunted and killed by the Darksiders, due to the fact they were already on the subject. Lulu asked what exactly changed into manifest occurring inside the outside international. Hearing that query nearly made Chinwan spiral from the sheer horror of all of it. There are monsters everywhere. The Darksiders have taken over. Greater than 12 of the human populace has all at once mutated into different varieties of monsters. They went wild attacking regular people. Chaos has prevailed, and order now not exists. Most of the people in the secure settlements do not even dare to head outdoor. After seeing the terror of all of it, they can only curl up within the Civil Protection Army fortification, praying for the uncertain arrival of the army. Chin says that however he is desperately trying to get Lulu internal that depressing location, going as far as yanking her arm. They only were given this a long way without losing their lives due to Lu Fen Yuan's drone taking pictures the vacuum zones of the Darksiders. Nobody in their proper mind would have come ahead to hazard their lives on this kind of risky rescue venture. So he wants to be the knight in shining armor and get her into what he calls safety. Lula's arm turned into beginning to hurt with just how tight the brute was gripping it, seeking to yank her out of her seat. This Chinan fella simply gives off terrible vibes universal, so Le Changyin decided to interfere. The use of the partitions of the urn residence to push a bowl over the shelf. The clay bowl hit Chin Wen on his shoulder, shattering into tiny little pieces. The surprise and pain loosened the grip on Lulu's arm. Liu Feng Yuan decided to step up to shield her pal. As far as she knows, Chinwen wasn't this violent earlier then. He wasn't the type to hurt others out of impatience or something like that. That made Mr. Buzzkill's wild temper flare even harder. He asserted that he risked his lifestyles to come search for Lulu, and now this E-woman is scolding him like an infant. He added that if she maintains being so talkative and hesitant, she will in the end die at the fingers of Darksiders. Nerd boy Chung Jun tried to mediate jokingly, asking his bro if meeting a Darksider simply now indignant him so much. For now, the lads will go outdoor to chill out even as the women percent up and get equipped to go away. Our sweet summer season infant Lulua beginning to blame herself for Mr. Buzzkill's movements, while Lu Fangyuan was glaring daggers at the brute out of doors. Chin turned into nevertheless fuming for some reason. In his opinion, the girls are simply not seeing how risky it has emerged as outright here. He is additionally regretting being so impulsive and tagging along on this suicide challenge. Chung Jun tried to stay level-headed and floor, urging Chin Dubuen no longer to be so rash. Lulu had survived all by myself, so she may want a while to accept the reality of the situation. Thinking that the huge man turned into just hungry, he provided a few roasted potatoes organized by way of Lulu herself. The ride back home could be even more difficult, so they must at least fill their bellies up with vitamins first. Chin took the potato like it was his rightful belonging. He commented that this is how it should be in the first place, that he should be getting resources first. This brazen act did not escape the land's watchful eyes. Li Qingyan and Toot Toot quietly watched the dispute from afar. They had been still watching for whatever could show up. Subsequent, Tut Toot confoundedly asked if this is how people typically interact with each other. Ling Yin responded that it wasn't. Human conduct cannot be generalized. All Toot Toot knows is that he is seeing an ungrateful and callous thug, an ideal target to steal vitamins from without feeling responsible. Those people are even consuming the potato stem portions that he painstakingly grew. Right now, based on the landlord's observation, those human beings aren't capable partners who can live here and work together. They are friends with Lulu, however. They specifically came to bring her away with no room for refusal. Now, if they really want to deliver Lulu away, and she wants to be part of them, should Lin Yin appear and prevent them? Does he actually have the right to intervene with Lulu's selection? Toot Toot was used to just doing what he wanted to do, so he asked if those questions were even crucial. Being a former human is crucial for Li Chengyin, more important than Toot Toot's potatoes. Putting aside the topic of potato stem portions, the snarky flower has observed something even more critical to share. The three humans came from so far away, but they don't have a touch of dark elements on them. If they were exposed to the outside for so long, where in the world did the dark elements go? Li Chenyin found out the implication of that statement, and it's a horrifying one. After the men finished the potatoes outside, Chung Jun asked Mr. Buzzkill if he was in a better mood now that he had eaten something. In the meantime, Nerd Boy will just check on the girls. Perhaps they're already prepared to leave. However, Chin is one ungrateful son of a gun. Instead of thanking Lulu for the potatoes, he spat them out as if food wasn't running scarce. He emphasized that this was surely the most disgusting potato he'd ever tasted. Chingin begged to differ. There were no problems in his potatoes. Maybe the huge guy was just having tension problems right now. Hearing the word tension did not sit well with Chin Wen. He admitted that he is concerned for everybody's protection. If not for that, would he be concerned? He closed his fist intensely until veins started coming out. They're in an apocalypse, full of monsters at every corner, and he just wants to protect everyone. With his face gradually turning into that of a disgustingly ugly Darksider, he angrily asked why his group kept on forcing him to take tough actions. Inside the earthen house, LeFuan proudly displayed the agricultural drone that she had taken from the School of Animal Science. In their harmony, recollecting people, stealing is all good in the apocalypse. The drone also has an infrared ray feature. Using it to bring the group back to the Civil Protection Army fortification should not be a problem. They can just take the path away from Darksider interest. She had been rattling on for some time now, but she noticed that Lulu didn't seem so happy with the idea of getting out of the woods, so she decided to ask her friend what exactly she was worried about. What in the world could make her so hesitant to get back into civilization? Lulu smiled awkwardly, not knowing exactly how she should answer. Previously, Ling Yin had only said that he hoped to find out the situation in the outside world. But what should Lulu do in this situation when her friend wants her to join the rescue group back in the town? She feared that if she left without saying goodbye to her savior, Ling Yin would be irritated at her for being so ungrateful. Chung Jun and Mr. Buzzkill re-entered the Earth House. Nerd Boy asked if Lulu was now mentally prepared to move out. He thought that she was just afraid of running into Darksiders outside. Lulu asserted that that wasn't the case. She considered just telling them the truth about her situation, but she was afraid that LeFuan and the others would just think that she was crazy. Inside her mind, she was already scrambling frantically. It'd be better if Le Chengyin just came out and did something to resolve her current dilemma. She simply wanted Mr. Landlord to tell her what to do. The irritable Chin Wen finally ran out of patience and said that enough was enough. They had wasted enough time already. If Lulu didn't want to leave, then he would gladly tie her up and carry her along forcefully. Anyway, if they continued wasting even more precious time here, they'd just be gambling with everybody's safety and lives. From his perspective, Lulu's indecisiveness was indicative of her saying that it didn't matter if the trio lived or died. Le Fuen stood up for her friend, asking the big man if his dull monkey brain had finally snapped and he had gone mad. Qin Wen didn't actually have the patience to persuade a friend. Well, it was like he wasn't even the Qin Wen that she knew. He didn't have any semblance of basis for his wild conjectures, and he just kept on talking about death whenever he opened his mouth. If he was so scared of dying, then he shouldn't have joined the rescue team. Le Fuen was on a roll then. She asked Mr. Buzzkill if he saw himself as some kind of savior, that without his brilliance everyone else would perish. Based on the darkening of his expression, it seemed like the eagle-eyed girl hit the nail right on the head. She took over with the decision-making, urging Chung Jun to continue according to their plan. Miss Irel would go outside to launch the drone while Nerd Boy made sure that the surroundings were secure. Her assertiveness just made glasses agree. Le Fuen turned to Qin Wen one last time, urging him to wake the hell up and not allow himself to become the load holding back the group. Ultimately, unbeknownst to everyone, the darkness inside Mr. Buzzkill's system was already itching to come out. Being forced to confront his fears with a reality check just made it worse. The plan proceeded as they had mapped out. Lung Yuan set up her drone to scout the nearby areas from the safety of the skies. They chose a decent clearing as a launching point. The wind pressure was just right, so they could set off any second now. Holding the controller and preparing to wear the mask monitor, the journey back to the settlement looked like it might be a breeze. Le Fuen Yuan optimistically hoped for there to be no Darksiders blocking their path back home. Finally, they lifted off. The drone suddenly ascended to the skies to record the safest route that the group could possibly take. Things were going so well until they weren't anymore. A freaking hook shot aimed specifically at the drone launched into the air, smashing it into a million pieces, dropping rain debris on the people below. Le Fuen Yuan took off the screen mask that had turned off. No one saw this coming, so Nerd Boy and Irel were thoroughly shocked. Turning to the direction that the hook shot came from, they saw the burly figure of Qin Wen coming out of the earth house, with one of his arms extended like a rope. His fingers took the form of the hook shot. He kept on repeating that the Darksiders were responsible for this. The hook shot and the long rope quickly flexed back into its arm-length form. Qin Wen deliriously chanted that he was the only one that could save them all from the Darksiders. They should listen to his orders if they wanted to be saved. Lulu was still inside the house, and she was the closest one to the madman. She didn't have a clear view of his face, so she wasn't sure if this man had turned to the dark side completely. The obscure darkness in his face and the glaring light in his eyes pretty much showed it. However, the odd thing was Qin had not stopped proclaiming that he was just protecting the group. From his perspective, they were the ones who did not understand. Knowing that this man was already a lost cause, Lulu tried to run past him out of the entrance with all the speed that she could muster out of desperation and fear. She managed to run away quite a distance from the partially converted Darksider to warn the others that Qin Wen had fallen to depravity. Hookshot Boy still had some brain cells left to feel wronged by the fact that his so-called comrades were not paying attention to a word that he was saying. Lulu was even running away from him like he was a monster. So, like a sane and normal human, he yelled that everyone would die by his hands as he readied his hook-shot arm for another round of release. Before Qin could extend his rope to blast his hook shot off, the earth house behind him began cracking through itself, caving in out of nowhere. When it finally collapsed in one fell swoop, the heavy chunks of solid rocks dog-piled on top of the hook-shot Darksider. As Lulu continued running, only turning around to see the destruction behind her. Like always, after seeing something bad happen, Lulu's first thought was to blame herself for everything. Chung Jun and Le Fuen Yuan were also safe, as they were far from the collapse. They were both confused, as Qin Wen had never gotten into direct contact with Darksiders. They didn't even consider such a wild variable in their escape plan. Miss Eagle snapped out of her confusion to grab the gobsmacked Lulu from where she was fearfully standing. She was the only one who kept her wits about her. She knew that a Darksider was not like the zombies from movies. Besides, they had no idea how these monsters mutate. She also told the nerd to start running, unless he thought he could fight against a Darksider. From the collapsed house, the sinister hook shot from before forced its way out of the heavy debris, homing in on the fleeing group. Fortunately, Lulu decided to look back in a panic, urging the target of the hook, Lefuan, to dodge to the side. Miss Eagle also turned around to see that the sharp metal tip was about to pierce through her body. But before the hook shot even got remotely close to her, a piece of solid land protruded out of nowhere to stop the seemingly unstoppable momentum of the hook. Instead of skewering the eagle-eyed girl's body, it was halted by some earth-bending hocus-pocus. Lefuan Yuan looked at the halted tip of metal, glistening with the reflection from the sunlight. Fearfully, had the earth not decided to intervene, she would have been done. The hook part of the weapon was lodged too tightly in the rock, but there was some trembling happening on the other side of the rope, the spot where the earth house had collapsed. Using the elasticity of the rope going back to its original length, Qin Wen, the Darksider, escaped the weight of the debris unscathed. He was still blabbering on about how it was the Darksider's fault that all of this was happening. His other hand balled into a fist as it also started turning into an alien material, his flesh gaining a different property. Qin Wen kept on going on and on about how the group needed him, and they could not survive without his help. An invisible hand stopped his overgrown fist before it reached the other survivors. Based on the sizes alone, it looked like a huge mismatch, but the invisible hand stood steady. Lung Yin finally decided to show up at the appropriate junction. His body was in the position of the earth wall that stopped the hook shot in the first place. This was his first time witnessing the process of a human mutating into a gruesome Darksider. He had to admit that this Qin Wen fella seemed to be a bit special. Mr. Hook-shot Darksider was still cognizant that someone was preventing his attack. He could feel it, but he couldn't see the landlord's form. As far as Qin Wen was aware, even though the mysterious presence seemed like a part of the land, there was a clear awareness at play. Then why would a non-human stop him? In Qin Wen's deluded mind, he was just doing his best to protect the group. So how was he in the wrong? Lung Yin interestingly asked if this was true. If this is the case, then he and Qin Wen might have something in common. He wanted to know if the former Mr. Buzzkill could still maintain his own identity as a human even after mutating. Qin Wen answered that he and the other 3 survivors were fellow students, friends even. Those simple facts would never change. He so desperately wanted to save them, but it was manifesting in a messed up manner. He just kept on convincing himself that he could save everyone and that this was the only way to do so. As a mutated creature himself, Lung Yin's instincts were telling him that the man was not lying, or at least he thought that what he was saying and doing was absolutely the truth. If that was the case, considering that he was able to get along with Lulu, then why couldn't Qin Wen? There was a possibility that the answer lay in the eyes. The mark of hatred and darkness was apparent in Qin Wen's eyes. The Darksider's other arm finally completed its mutation, taking the form of multiple flexible ropes with a high degree of durability. They easily tore through Lung Yin's earth wall body. Those ropes found their way toward the body of poor JockJut. They did not run when they had the chance to do so. Now the nerd was paying the price. Lung Yin turned around to see the damage done for not taking the other mutated arm into account with his earth defense. Qin Wen's transformation was closing in on 100%. All the human lines on his face were gone and replaced by the monstrous features of a Darksider. He started yapping about how his friends were infected by the dark element and how he must destroy those who were infected to save them once and for all. Nerd man JockJut was taken aback by the betrayal of his close buddy and still couldn't believe that Qin Wen had become his killer. The poor guy died like that, killed by his best friend who had now turned into a monster. In the next instant, JockJut's breathless body was already falling to the ground. Lefuan only managed to shout his name in despair, but it was already too late. JockJut couldn't hear anything in this life. She could only regret the decision to stop in this cursed place, but nothing could be changed anymore. Now, the girls had to think of themselves and run away as soon as possible to save their lives. Even though Chung Jun was dead, Darksider Chin Wen was not going to stop. Everything was not enough for him, and he was not going to let his past friends run away and abandon him. In his altered mind, only he could protect them, and if they didn't want that protection, then they shouldn't live. The girls barely made it to the cliff, but it wasn't enough. The Darksiders' attack caught up with them, and, in a last-ditch effort to escape, they jumped into the unknown. The cliff was too high. There were several dozen meters to the ground. Le Fuan, in flight, already realized that this was the end and here they would die. She began to blame herself for putting them all in this situation. After all, she was the one who had initiated the expedition to find Lulu, even though it was very dangerous and unknown how people mutated into Darksiders. In the end, she came to the conclusion that it was her fault, and that it was due to her that her friends died. Resigned to her near death, she closed her eyes and was ready to accept fate. To her surprise, she didn't feel the hard impact on the ground. Instead, she and Lulu hit a slope that had just appeared beneath them and rolled down it like a child's slide. Of course, Le Fuan was too surprised by this turn of events and made the mistake of flipping to the other side. Now she was breaking her fall with her face and, already at the bottom, had to spit out earth and sand from her mouth. Her face now had a full palette of scratches and bruises. Still, this was far better than death, and Le Fuan couldn't believe her luck. Looking back, she wondered why the terrain had so suddenly changed right under them. It was still hard for her to understand how she had survived such a fall. Lulu hurriedly hugged her friend and reassuringly asked if she was all right. However, Le Fuan was not someone who needed to be comforted. The only thing she was interested in right now was what the hell was happening. Lulu was about to explain to her, though it might be quite hard to believe her words. But she was certain that they shouldn't run away from this place. After all, there was their hero, Lun Yin, who would surely resolve all the issues and keep them safe in this world full of dangers. Meanwhile, up above, Lun Yin was just fixing the problem with the Darksider. The mutated Chin Wen was quite unhappy with the fact that some piece of land was preventing him from being with his friends and made him miss them. He couldn't wait to continue saving them. The Darksider was now going to destroy his enemy who was preventing him from moving on to saving people. Our hero, of course, thought that such logic looked very dubious. How could you even think that killing your friends would save them? Where is there any sanity in that? Lun Yin was wrong to think that he could negotiate with him, and that's why Chung Jun died. Our hero was too naive to think that Chin could be like himself and could continue to live the life of a reasonable person after mutation. But in the end, Chin turned out to be just another typical Darksider without a shadow of human awareness and only with instincts to kill and meaningless muttering. Such an incredibly dangerous monster should now be disposed of without a trace of regret. Feeling this, Lun Yin prepared for battle and activated his power. The Darksider tensed up and was truly shocked by the sheer amount of dark elements. He immediately rushed into the attack, intending to save them all, whatever that meant. Lun Yin tried to stop his hook attack with his hand, but this turned out to be a terrible idea. The hook simply destroyed his arm and pierced through his body. Lun Yin was surprised to see such strength in a Darksider. Was this monster really that strong? After pondering, our hero decided that it wasn't that Chin was particularly strong. It was just that he himself had become too weak. The reason was very simple. In this mountainous region, the soil was too stony with little ground, and even though he had moved some of his land here, the amount of ground was still insufficient. This greatly reduced his power, while the Darksider was full of energy and strength. He continued his ramblings, certain that only he could save people, and this piece of land was a monster in a way. Our hero even felt sorry for him now that he was a common Darksider. He had nowhere to go. Those exposed to the dark sun are tainted by the dark elements, and the only way to save them from suffering is to kill them. After all, once converted, Darksiders cannot return to normal human society due to their appearance, aggressive nature, and lack of human awareness. no matter how it sounded. It was only possible for Darksiders to return to the dark side, to further mutated beings. That's why Lung Yin reminded his opponent that he had no place to go and no destination once he went to the dark side. Although our hero was a Darksider himself, he was different from the others because he had kept his mind and consciousness. Now he was determined to show the last mercy to the creature that used to be Qin Wen and bury him to end his suffering. Of course, the monster was against such an act of mercy and was willing to do anything to suffer a little more in this world. He made his hook rotate, turning it into a kind of blender to break his opponent into pieces. But Lung Yin didn't sit idle either and prepared his own trick using rapidly growing roots. This time, the hook was unable to destroy his hands. Even more so, it couldn't even touch them. The roots stopped him effectively. Of course, everything had to be paid for. Now our hero had to use plants that lived in symbiosis with him, and he was sorry for the damage he had caused them. But the main thing now was to deal with the Darksider. After that, he would reward them generously for their help. Now enhancing his ground body with roots, Lung Yin was able to deprive his opponent of his arm without any problems. The Darksider immediately roared in pain and rage and stood still for a moment to catch his breath. It seemed that he had given up and was about to start running away. But it only seemed so. Soon, the rage and hatred that filled him burst out, and he used his other hand to attack. Lulu could be heard shouting behind him as she climbed to the top of the cliff again. Despite the danger, she brought with her a backpack with a very useful tool, which she hurled to our hero and suggested he use it. Lung Yin turned around just in time to avoid falling victim to the Darksider's attack and quickly caught the tool. It was just what he needed, big and sharp garden shears. They alone might be enough, but our hero thought otherwise. Wise Lung Yin decided to enhance them with the power of the earth and the flexibility of plants to combine with the sharpness of metal weapons to create an ultimate weapon. Now he had a power in his hands that the Darksider would surely not be able to cope with, no matter how hard he tried and no matter how much he hated it. Now it was time to put this new weapon to the test. The Darksider wasn't going to give up, no matter what, and went on the attack. Lung Yin only smiled contentedly at this. This fool didn't even realize that he had already lost. With one confident move, he destroyed the Darksider's second arm, and only pieces of wood were scattered in different directions. Our hero didn't stop there and went on the attack himself. Now that his opponent didn't have a single hand, he had no trouble giving him a crushing blow to the head. The Darksider fell helplessly to the ground, his mask of darkness cracked, and due to his lack of hands, he couldn't get up. Neither would Lung Yin allow him to. He towered right above the monster, placing a tip to its throat. The Darksider had been defeated. Toot Toot right away emerged from the ground as soon as the danger had passed. He criticized our hero's weapon, calling it insufficiently durable, though pretty hard. But among his incisive comments was the helpful advice to bury the Darksider in the ground to absorb nutrients from it, according to the usual rule of nature. Of course, the Darksider didn't like that prospect very much and, in desperation, shouted another load of nonsense. Before burying him underground, Lung Yin had one last question for him. Why did he become like this? He simply shouted again that he wanted to save people. This made our hero think that perhaps Qin became a Darksider not only due to his exposure to the dark sun. It was because of his constant paranoia that drew him to the dark side. The ground and roots under Lung Yin began to absorb the monster. The earth would deal with him and become a safe place that would ensure that no one else would be killed by a so-called salve. When everyone eventually calmed down and came to their senses, only 2 small mounds of earth remained near the cliff. Lu Fang Yuan looked at them with sorrow. She wasn't crying, but she was barely holding on. Her best friends had died in one fell swoop, and now she only had Lulu left. For Lulu's sake, she had to be strong. Lulu, seeing her depressed state, wanted to comfort her and distract her from her loss by introducing her to Le Chung Yin. However, there was one small problem, which our hero hurriedly reminded her of. His body was difficult to see, but he had a solution to this problem. All that was left was to find out if Lu Fangyuan could hear him. He himself wanted to ask her if she was angry with him. Le Chongyin was well aware that he had screwed up. If not for his indecision, Chang Jun would still be alive, and Qin Wen would have been neutralized sooner. If our hero hadn't raised false hopes about Darksiders, he could have handled the situation much better. Surprisingly, Lu Fangyuan responded that she didn't blame him for anything. She thought he must be an idiot to come up with something like that. In fact, when she came out of the civilian shelter, she was mentally prepared for such an outcome. Even if the worst thing happened to her, she wouldn't blame anyone else but herself. Lulu was not surprised by her words, but by the fact that she could hear Le Chongyin's words. Thus, she asked how she could do it. Lu Fangyuan didn't know the answer to this question, but for some reason, after Chang Jun's funeral, she had started to feel the presence of another person nearby, even though she couldn't see him. Now, thanks to the picture made from the ground, there was some kind of talking object in front of her. It was more like an abandoned clay doll that had been broken many times and covered in dust. That is roughly what our hero looked like from her perspective. Lulu also realized an interesting fact about Le Chongyin. He himself was a sentient Darksider who became a piece of land, and he had a friendly plant Darksider called Toot Toot. Their existence was hard to believe, and other survivors would surely laugh upon hearing something like this. But now, the two of them had seen them with their own eyes and couldn't doubt it. Despite such an unusual company of wise Darksiders, Lu Fangyuan was still very sad. Even such an uncommon company couldn't distract her from her loss. Lulu offered her to stay with them and live there, but she was in no hurry to agree. She needed to think and rest and was going to announce her decision the next day. Lu Fangyuan was very tired and asked if she could stay at their house for one night. As expected, Lu Fangyuan was too shocked by the death of her friends, and Lulu was worried about her. She was sure that she should spend time with her this evening to calm her down. Well, our hero didn't mind the additional company. It's more fun together. The evening passed quickly, and the girls, exhausted from a stressful day, quickly fell asleep. But something was wrong, and Lulu was shivering. She was sick and had a fever. Outside, our hero, free from the need for sleep, was looking up at the sky and pondering the future. Near him was Toot Toot, who was wondering whether the number of human participants had increased permanently or only temporarily. The Chongyin did not know for sure. Since the dark sun had set, communication had been cut off, and the scouting drone had been destroyed. In this situation, if Lu Fangyuan was as smart as she said, she wouldn't leave and go on a risky journey alone. Toot Toot had a poor understanding of human behavior, so he asked if she knew a safer place to live. Why did she come here to him? Such actions seemed very unreasonable. The answer was simple: to save her friend. It was proof that she was a good person, and Le Chongyin wanted to shelter only good people in his land. For Toot Toot, such proof did not clarify anything, and he despaired to understand their actions, saying that the thoughts, words, and actions of animals were very hard to understand, unlike plants. The morning of the next day was never calm and serene. It began with the screams of Lu Fangyuan, who was asking Lulu what had happened to her. Le Chongyin came running to her screams to find out what was going on, but Lu Fangyuan couldn't explain anything to him. Lulu had a high fever, but its cause was unknown. It could have been anything: an allergy to an insect bite, a parasitic infection, or even sepsis. Lulu herself thought it was because she was too tired and her immune system had deteriorated. On top of that, she had been desperately fighting for her life for the past few days, and her spirit was too anxious. She was sure that she just needed to get some sleep and everything would pass. Lu Fangyuan was not going to let things go. She was very worried about her friend and was willing to do her best to help her get better. Judging from the symptoms, Lulu needed antibiotics, but unfortunately, they didn't have any. To get them, they would need to go back to the civilian shelter and get them there. That place was not far away. It would take less than a day to get there and back. and Lu Fangyuan was willing to immediately set off on this dangerous journey. However, in the meantime, Lulu needed to be closely watched and taken care of. She assigned these responsibilities to our hero. When she was about to leave their home, Le Cheng-yin stopped her. He reminded her that she wouldn't be able to get out of this desert safely on her own without the help of a scouting drone. If he could go with her, he would certainly protect her. But unfortunately, his range of motion was limited to this piece of land, and if he moved outside of it, it would be too slow. Lulu just wouldn't be able to last that long. The problems and dangers along the way didn't stop Lu Fangyuan. She was willing to take the risk and go on her own. She didn't see the point of living in a world without her friends. That's why she was willing to put absolutely everything on the line to save Lulu. Seeing her determination, our hero decided not to stand aside and help. The very next moment, he tore off his eye. This sudden act shocked Lu Fangyuan because she had no idea why he did it. But to be honest, Le Cheng-yin wasn't even sure what he was doing. All he wanted to do was to test his hunches. With all his might, he cast his eye into the sky. Because he didn't know much about his new body, he had to test everything on his own. Surprisingly enough, his idea was confirmed. The piece of earth separated from his body could indeed continue to have a part of his perception. However, it could only last for a short time. Only a few seconds later, his eye had turned into a piece of earth that no longer had anything to do with him. But Toot Toot knew how even this problem could be overcome. He only needed to infuse the piece of earth with dark energy. Toot himself moved like an animal on the same principle, and could break free from the ground by expending dark elements. In this case, our hero wondered how many dark elements it would take to separate a piece of earth from himself for 24 hours and still maintain the same perception during that time. Surely, it wouldn't be a small amount. Toot Toot tried to calculate approximately, and even froze in place when he realized how much it would take. However, when he looked at the house where Lulu was lying sick, suffering in a fever, Toot Toot dared and asked if one day he would also fall sick. Would they also be willing to spend resources to save him? Le Cheng-yin assured him that, of course, he would do his best. It would be natural. After all, they were now a symbiotic group together and should take care of each other. Step by step, Toot Toot realized everything and began to gather dark elements. His roots broke free, and he was now ready to help his friends. He climbed higher, specifically to gather more energy and transmit it. Lu Fangyuan was shocked at such a quick transformation. Before this little flower seemed quite innocent to her. Toot Toot wasted no time and started to fill our hero's land with dark energy that he himself absorbed from the sun and earth. This amount should have been enough for Le Cheng-yin to be able to separate a piece of earth from his main body and still maintain his perception for a full 24 hours. The sound of energy filling his body was like the beeping sound of resource production in some game. Le Cheng-yin was amazed that Toot Toot knew so much and wondered what other purposes dark energy could be used for. Was Toot Toot really using it to become smarter? However, in reality, he was just learning by watching our hero. And now, by example, he learned what the concept of groups and friends meant to people. Now he was hurrying Le Cheng-yin to act faster without wasting the precious time Toot Toot had invested. They had to act fast, but who knows what obstacles and dangers awaited them on the way. That's it for now. We've covered all the available chapters. When another chapter is released, we'll make another recap. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to our channel, like the video, and stay safe. Soon after, he raised his eye to the sky, as if to confirm something crucial. He found that in any event, when a body part left him, it may as yet keep up with faculties momentarily, yet inside the space of seconds would return to normal Earth. Tonum would be able to pull his roots out of the ground and move like an animal if he consumed shadow essence, as Tutu mentioned. Tonum was left wondering how much shadow essence a body part would need to survive on its own for an entire day as a result of this. As Tutu pondered this, it turned back to Tonum and asked if everyone would do everything in their power to save it if it ever got that sick. First, it looked into the earthen house at Lulax's suffering. Tonum grinned, guaranteeing too that obviously they would, as they were every one of the one family now. Tutu said that it had slowly come to understand everything as it began to release dark energy. Huang Wen was shocked when the enormous roots of Tutu emerged from the earth at that exact moment. It said it would attempt to accumulate however much shadow embodiment as could be expected and move it to Tonum before night fell, to supply enough for a human body part to leave its fundamental structure. Tonum silently mused that Tutu's form resembled a video game's resource-generating machine as he took in the energy. He asked Tutu, slightly perplexed, if it had used shadow essence to boost its intelligence. Tutu laughed and thanked Tonum for introducing it to the idea of community. To avoid making a mistake, Tutu urged them to leave as soon as possible that afternoon. When Tonum got adequate power from Tu, he immediately set off with Huang Wen to find antitoxins for Lu Remis, while Tu assumed the obligation of safeguarding her alone. Huang Wen threw Tonum's eye high up so he could travel and look around. As a result, dark faces were easier to spot and avoid. Fortunately, the forest was sparsely populated, so the concentration of dark faces was low, and the two worked together effectively. Tonum expressed doubts to Huang Wen as they moved on, doubting that they could actually obtain antibiotics in this day and age because a small group of powerful people probably controlled all resources and wouldn't give them up. Huang Wen confidently responded, "Don't worry," as her general practitioner brother Le Fong Tai managed the medical supplies. They might be able to bring him back to treat Lu Lax with any luck. She suggested that Tonum examine the picture of her and her brother to familiarize himself. After that, Huang Wen's face became more serious as she mumbled something under her breath before evaporating. Tonum saw and asked what she implied. Huang Wen advised them to look because they had reached the main road and the location was only a few kilometers down it. She dashed out onto the road, but her initial excitement quickly gave way to dread when she saw the city in front of her engulfed in raging flames, indicating that dark faces had destroyed it. She was greatly alarmed by the discovery because she had not anticipated a fire in that direction. She became incredibly stressed for those shielding there. When he suddenly saw a shadowy figure sneaking up behind Huang Wen to attack, Tonum, who had also made it to the main road and advised Huang Wen to try to calm herself, saw it. The ferocious creature was already upon her when he yelled for help. She appeared to be unable to escape in time. Huang Wen grabbed a steel rod quickly and swung it hard, hitting the dark face in the head. Tonum looked at her in shock and disbelief because he had not anticipated such strength from her. Huang Wen fiercely declared that this dark face was scrawny, weak, and devoid of any tough parts, and that she could handle any of them as long as they weren't the massive, rock-hard variety, using the rod with obvious skill. Seeing Tonum's bewildered look, she hollered, asking what that face was for, and in the event that he thought she was only a weight. Tonum insisted that he had not meant any disrespect by frantically waving his hands. They were interrupted by a massive horde of dark faces rising like molten lava from below, cutting them off from their path. Tonum asked Huang Wen, glancing at the approaching horde, how many she could handle at once, and if there were enough to satisfy her. As the dark faces moved closer, Huang Wen became pale. Spinning around in fear, she yelled at Tonum to utilize his soil-filled, brainless head to consider something, just to find he had evaporated. With the lava-like monsters relentlessly pursuing, Huang Wen fled, cursing as she ran and asking if he wouldn't abandon her. The dark faces fell to the ground as earthen mounds suddenly rose. Huang Wen was shocked seeing the ground underneath them go to sloppy mess. After that, Tonum came out and looked at the dead things. He said that they were, in fact, just a bunch of stupid people, and that tripping them was a new trick he had learned. He said to begin dealing with these innocuous things and charged at the dull appearances close by Huang Wen, both wearing startling articulations. Knowing that breaking the creatures' faces would prevent them from rising again, they targeted them. The glowing black faces of lava had taken over the entire city. The fortified shelter was approached cautiously by Tonum and Fuang Wen. She explained that there were none around when they left, and that they all appeared to have been ignited by the same fire. Tonum expressed concern by asking if they could still get the antibiotics if the shelter she had previously hidden in had collapsed. Fuang Wen remained steadfast, stating that inside was a secret safe room that only a select few knew about and that they would not give up until they themselves confirmed the worst-case scenario. Tonum complimented her by gazing at her and stating that she would undoubtedly be extremely strong and successful in peaceful times. Fuang Wen simply humming and replied sadly, "If only that were true, in spite of the praise." With Fuang Wen directing the way, they went into a room. As Tonum analyzed the environmental elements, he saw no signs of dim face action. He expected the fire had likely determined everybody to escape outside and was going to expand when a severe assault from behind crushed his head. The aggressor was Fuang Wen's sibling, shouting, "Bite the dust, you beast!" as he struck. When Fuang Wen intervened and demanded to know what he thought he was doing, he was about to strike again. Fang Tai replied casually that he was just hitting the monster and asked if she was okay despite the fact that he was surprised to see her. With his head broken, Tonum managed to get back up and retorted angrily that Fang Tai was in trouble and was fine, despite the fact that he was certainly not. The sight horrified Fang Tai to the point where he nearly fainted. To make it clear that Tonum was on her side and wouldn't hurt Fang Tai, Fuang Wen stepped quickly between them. When asked what had transpired, she stated that she had only been gone for a day. Fang Tai responded, still shaken, that if Fuang Wen had said Tonum wouldn't hurt her, it had to be true. Tonum thought to himself as he observed the siblings that the two were quite distinct from one another. After that, Fang Tai came out and said that they were all wrong and that the situation wasn't caused by a virus. He depicted how the earlier day, somebody had transformed into a fire dim face and that any individual who contacted the fire would likewise transform into one. Everyone panicked and fled when the dark faces appeared. Fang Tai only managed to grab a walkie-talkie after the crowd forced him to leave. Those who managed to escape sealed the doors behind them so that they wouldn't turn into dark faces, while many others were less fortunate and were trapped inside with all of the supplies. Fang Tai felt lucky to have survived. Tonum became concerned upon hearing this and demanded confirmation that the supplies were out of reach. He realized that they would have to fight their way into the underground shelter, where a lot of dark faces were waiting, in order to retrieve them. Lulax lay in bed, exhausted and in agony as Tonum frantically searched for antibiotics. She became aware of her feverish state as she struggled to open her eyes. She was terrified at the thought of lying there and waiting to die. She was curious as to where Tutu and Tonum were. Tutu looked around outside, grateful that the sun was shining brightly, allowing it to absorb more dark energy. The land itself appeared to have a biological instinct of its own, still receiving and transmitting dark energy, despite the fact that Tonum's consciousness had completely vanished. Tu pondered to itself that in the event that it used this much dull component, it wouldn't do so again next time without a prize. It considered what people called this was it knowledge. Just at that moment, Lulax suddenly appeared behind it and poured some solution into a bag onto Tutu, making it scream. Lulax laughed when he saw Tutu's reaction and said that it was just nutrient solution because Tutu looked like it really needed it. Tutu continued to express concern, stating that Lulax was ill and required strength preservation to combat the illness. Luramis constrained a grin, guaranteeing Tu she knew and was simply getting up for a few water and the restroom. She noted that Tutu was effectively absorbing the nutrients. She told Tutu not to give her that look as she returned inside. Watching her leave, Tu didn't know how to respond, believing that assuming that it had a cerebrum, perhaps it could comprehend what Luramis had seen. Fuang Wen and Fang Tai were putting on protective gear at the safe house while they entered to look for the vaccine. Due to the fact that they only had 2 sets of gear, Fang Tai warned Fuang Wen to exercise caution. Fuang Wen was worried because he thought it would be difficult to deal with the dark element on its own, even if the fire element itself wasn't dangerous. Tonum, now also in protective gear, said that the plan was for him to enter first, and that the other two should enter after him if they heard any noise. Fuang Wen chuckled at his slightly discolored skin. Tonum snorted accordingly not to chuckle. He expressed obtusely that their objective was exclusively to recover the medication and assuming things quit fooling around. He was under no commitment to safeguard everybody's lives. He cautioned them not to hold him to human morality and that he was also a dark entity. Tonum was reassured by Fuang Tai, who assured him that he would take full responsibility for himself. Tonum then, at that point, began executing his arrangement, getting a fuel hose and creeping through the ventilation shaft into the safe house. Squeezing through small spaces was simple for an earthling. Fuang Wen worriedly asked her brother if he was certain he wanted to get involved as Tonum entered. Fuang Tai demonstrated his resolve by grabbing the walkie-talkie and declaring that despite Tonum's assertion that Fuang Wen could be impulsive, he could not be. Fuang Wen said nothing more when he heard this. Numerous fire-based dark entities moved aimlessly inside the underground garage, but when they heard noise coming from above, they all roared toward the ventilation shaft. Tonum quickly kicked the door open and dashed out, eradicating one evil being in a split second. He used his ability to dig a mud pit and submerge several others. He saw the thickness of dim elements there was very high. He was confronted immediately by additional fast-moving attacks. Tonum slowly considered his options, thinking that since his body couldn't take in a lot of water, he couldn't use it to kill these fire-based dark entities. Be that as it may, he had an alternate arrangement. Rather than extinguishing the fire, he would utilize fuel to consume them. After being fueled, the dark beings erupted in flames and screamed in pain, just as predicted. Since experiencing these dull components, Tonum had seen most had human bodies, which wouldn't endure genuine fire. Additionally, when oxygen turned out to be scant, making breathing troublesome, the excess senses in their bodies would likewise dial back. The individual unaffected by this circumstance was the real annoyance. Tonum was pursued by a very large dark element, who screamed that he had disobeyed and would be punished. It launched an immediate attack, but a vehicle struck it as it approached. Individuals inside were Fuang Wen and Fuang Tai. Tonum said that he hadn't expected them to be so powerful when he saw them arrive. He had thought they were looking for an opportunity to drive over and provide more fuel. He inquired about the cost of their vehicle. Fuang Tai explained with awkward laughter that he had some money to buy a car because he worked at a private hospital. They would then keep going in the direction of the area where the survivors were defending themselves. Fuang Wen was answerable for really taking a look at the guide and affirming the course. A sound came from Fuang Tai's walkie-talkie at that very instant. Fuang Tai, can you hear me?" a voice inside said. "Just now, there was a huge uproar outside. Come right away and save us." In a walkie-talkie response, Fuang Tai stated that he understood and would be there immediately. As it sped through the tunnel, the car repeatedly struck mutants. Tonum, in the car, was perplexed. He was aware that those who were unable to flee would remain on this floor. He wondered if the survivors could have left given the number of mutants present. Because he had been outside and was certain that no one had escaped, Fuang Tai was certain that hadn't occurred. Everyone saw the door open as the car got closer to the safe room. Tonum felt a little suspicious when Fuang Tai rushed forward to check. Inside, possessions were dispersed. A person sat in the middle of the room and looked at his own feet, which were gradually changing into the feet of a person who had changed. He whispered, "Don't burn anymore," because he was afraid. Fuang Wen came over and inquired about his well-being. Fuang Tai also inquired about the other individuals. "Burn, burnt, burnt, all burnt," the young man who was sitting on the ground kept whispering. He had completely transformed into a magma mutant at that point, and the last bit of his consciousness was screaming that he didn't want to become one. In this risky circumstance, Tonum immediately pulled the other two back to keep away from the assault of flares ascending from the freak's body. To put out the fire, the mutant kept screaming. Being able to see someone transform into a mutant right in front of his eyes also caught Huang Tai off guard. Huang Wen stated then that Chen Wen had previously been like this. Tonum acted decisively and swung a hefty chunk of mud at the mutant. He was concerned that the mutant would sound too much like Tran Ban. He had been too lenient the previous time, which resulted in someone's death. When the mud covered the freak, the blazes on its body were promptly quenched. After killing so many mutants, Tonum said solemnly that he had come to realize that they used themselves as fuel to resonate with the fire, which meant they would die and go through a lot of pain. Tonum tried to touch the mutant with his hand, but it grabbed his arm right away. It warned against joining them. The mutant then thanked Tonum and passed away completely. This scene greatly surprised Huang Wen. The mutant, according to Tonum, was dead. Tonum looked around and wondered why the warehouse was empty when he asked Huang Tai about the supplies he had mentioned. Regardless of whether nobody made do, the provisions could never have taken off all alone. Additionally, Huang Tai did not comprehend what had transpired. His auntie had recently contacted him to inform him that they required immediate rescue. Tonum was curious when his auntie was mentioned. He inquired as to whether the two were concealing something from him. Huang Wen made sense of that. They were embraced when youthful, and when the freaks showed up, they concealed there together. Huang Tai stated that he would inquire about the situation with his auntie. He inquired about his mother's whereabouts using the walkie-talkie. It associated, and a popping voice quickly came through, saying, "Huang Tai, I want to hear you. Your auntie is getting closer to you." There were mutations among the survivors just now. We raced to another location after grabbing the supplies. Follow the road for cars. At the end, there are a lot of cars. We're concealing there. We have not yet been discovered by any mutants. Get here right away. Knowing that his auntie was safe filled Huang Tai with joy. He stated that they would immediately head there. Tonum stopped him as he turned to leave, stating that the location his auntie had indicated on the map was a dead end. They wouldn't be able to find a way out before anything happened. Additionally, her voice was excessively quiet, without any feeling of dread. Huang Tai said his mom was consistently similar to that, exceptionally quiet, never terrifying, and carefully arranging each step. He explained that their auntie treated them like her own children after their parents passed away young. Without her, they wouldn't have the professions everybody respected. Huang Wen appeared confused at this point. Tonum asked Huang Wen's thought process of this. Huang Wen squeezed Tonum's face and inquired as to why he called him Huang Wen. It weren't that near, say they. Because he was like a piece of land and didn't feel any pain. Tonum instructed Huang Wen to simply pinch him, saying that no matter what, their auntie had stolen the supplies, they had to leave. Huang Wen released and slowly removed his protective gear. His words were logical as usual. Perhaps it was not the same as with Tran Van. Tonum agreed with Huang Wen's decision because there was no other option. They went right to where Huang Tai's auntie had told them to go. In fact, there were a lot of haphazardly parked cars in front of them. Huang Tai was going to call out, yet Tonum halted him, telling him not to be imprudent and to notice first. Huang Wen noticed that there were no mutants in the air, and that the location was ideal for many people to hide. Hearing this, Tonum murmured and inquired as to whether Huang Wen could likewise detect the air and smell of freaks. According to Huang Wen, it was a metaphor for innate intuition. Huang Tai abruptly stopped when a voice from the front spoke. He discovered someone hiding behind a car. It was evidently his auntie. He ran forward with exuberance. His auntie turned around and was delighted to see Huang Tai. "See, I told you it was okay," Huang Tai stated as he looked at Tonum. "We wouldn't be hurt by my aunt." However, Tonum hurriedly called out to him at that moment. At the terrifying sight of the woman who raised them, poor Feng Qin's brain must have lost its way. Excited that he had been successful in locating Feng Yuan on her behalf, Auntie maintained that she was still the same person, declaring that her heart could finally be at peace now that the siblings had returned. She summoned the hundreds of smoldering Darksiders that were concealed in every crevice. Chang Yun got a move on, something from his palm. He pulled out his signature weapon, the massive garden shears he had used against the Darksiders' grappling hook, from the newly formed handles. The siblings were forced to face the harsh reality that their auntie was now a full-fledged Darksider when he barked at them to book it. The enormous scissors were enveloped in writhing soil and roots in a flash, joining Chang Yun's body and increasing their strength. Be that as it may, his initial slice was effectively diverted by two flaring Darksiders shaking metal lines, protecting their lord. Auntie asked with a smirk, "Where did this strange Earth kid come from?" She realized Chang Yun must be one of Feng Yuan's evil friends when it suddenly clicked. She sent off into an outburst about how she'd constantly cautioned Feng Yuan to remain at home and hit it hard as opposed to going crazy. But the obstinate girl didn't pay any attention. Auntie appeared to undergo a complete transformation into a fiery being as a result of that long-standing annoyance she felt at her inability to control Feng Yuan. She hurled a scorching fireball directly at Chang Yun, screaming in rage for him to get lost. Chang Yun couldn't escape the massive fire at such close range. His trusted garden shears flew into the air after it slammed into him. He miraculously landed on his feet, but the flames had badly cracked his earthen skin. He shuddered to think of how many poor souls Auntie had Darksider-fied with her power if fire could do that much damage to someone like him. That firm carcass they'd coincidentally found in the main room must have been one of her casualties. However, Auntie was not enthusiastic. She simply instructed Chang Yun to sprint and unleashed her army of ferocious Darksiders on him. Chang Yun was way over his head due to the relentless assault from all sides and the scorching heat. His body was shattered into numerous tiny fragments by the brutal assault. His soil appeared to have lost its cohesiveness due to Auntie's flames. No matter how hard he tried, he felt like his muscles were on fire and losing strength. Only his head was still alive and smoldering. The situation was beyond hopeless. He would probably die right now if this pace continued. Aunt calculated the intrusive whelp had been killed, her thoughtless cronies parroting all her words. As the flames around her subsided, she let half of her Darksider mask fall off. She beckoned to Feng Qin and asked him to take a seat so they could properly catch up. Chang Yun was taken aback. He had never seen a Darksider take such control over their appearance. Auntie ordered her gang to bring some chairs out of the parking garage and set up a small family get-together right there in the middle of it. She gave the siblings some bottled water that wasn't suspicious, acknowledging that their journey home must have been difficult. The ghostly, empty voices of the encompassing Darksiders didn't precisely make it the most enticing suggestion. Be that as it may, it wasn't similar to the kin had a very remarkable decision. The doctor gave the water a tentative acceptance, subtly indicating to his sister with his eyes that it had to be part of the supplies hidden away. This meant that the essential antibiotics needed to be close by. Feng Yuan was still having trouble comprehending this bizarre turn of events. Simple minutes prior, Aunt had gone crazy on Chang Yun. Presently she was getting along, behaving like everything was all around great. What's more, for what reason was Feng Yuan simply staying there opposite a Darksider without a care in the world? She still felt powerless. Aunt got on their anxiety, pondering so anyone might hear the reason why they appeared to be so nervous. She reasoned that the dire circumstance up top must have scared them. Prompt the talk about the significance of waiting at home, the most secure spot to be. The siblings accepted the situation, nodding in agreement and engaging in awkward chuckles. That is to say, who couldn't be somewhat tense and circled by many flaring Darksiders? The more bizarre things became, the more critical it became for them to heed Auntie's wise counsel. All things considered, when their folks shared the team with her consideration, she'd promised to continuously pay special attention to them. She refused to disappoint them. Feng Yuan clenched her jaw and balled her fists. She had heard this exact spiel so many times before she donned the Darksider costume. She had lost count of the number of times she had heard it. She looked frustrated at the ground and noticed something odd. Soil was creeping up her sleeves, eventually leaving a message to the right. She noticed Cheng Yun's severed head trying to get her attention as she glanced over. He admonished Auntie that she was similar to Qin when a Darksider who was still clinging to a powerful attachment from their previous life. Since Feng Yuan was a familiar face, she needed to keep an eye out for any opportunities to escape as the dirt shifted once more. Under her breath, Feng Yuan scoffed. At this point, referring to Auntie as family felt laughable. However, Auntie's bizarre hearing must have detected her contempt. She lunged at Feng Yuan, demanding to know what it was that was so fascinating that she couldn't listen. Auntie saw this as yet another effort to curb Feng Yuan's bad habits and disrespectful attitude as she watched over her niece. She presented Feng Yuan's brother as a shining example, a young man who had achieved incredible success and held a prestigious position that paid well. The ideal counterpoint to the troublemaker Feng Yuan, who had switched majors to an absurd agricultural program behind Auntie's back. Auntie noticed that Feng Yuan was focusing on Cheng Yun's disembodied head at that exact moment. He was startled right away. Aunt unassumingly requested one of her Darksiders to recover the impossible-to-miss object for nearer assessment. Cheng Yun broke into a sweat out of nervousness. She took a moment to look at the dirt ball as she turned it over in her hands. She simply saw it as an odd little sculpture made of soil. Cheng Yun was completely weirded out, yet basically he wasn't getting crushed into insensibility. As she resumed her attack on Feng Yuan, Auntie carelessly tossed the earth clump aside. She needed to stop fantasizing about giving in to her wanderlust. Take after her brother more, concentrate on her studies. Feng Yuan was yanked to her feet as she grabbed her by the wrist. Auntie insisted that she was not attempting to cause trouble. Feng Yuan's own good was the sole purpose of this hard love. Auntie held on to her niece with a vice grip, refusing to let go. Her hands igniting and scorching Feng Yuan's sleeves caused the Darksider mask to begin covering her entire face. There would be no retaliation this time. Auntie was determined to incorporate the siblings into her ideal family in this brave new world. She has total command over a large, contented clan of mindless, flaming Darksiders, the most aspired goal. Feng Yuan's thoughts drifted back to her carefree childhood, when she let her creative side run wild and created mud-based masterpieces. Auntie's furious screams would always cut through the fun, telling her to go inside and study. Consistently after school, as a matter of course, there was Aunt, prepared to barbecue her about schoolwork. Feng Yuan's weekends were filled with Auntie-mandated extra classes. Indeed, even something as basic as going for a climb would procure Aunt's hatred, excusing it as a futile exercise in futility. Her entire life, that equivalent refrain, "I'm making an effort not to hurt you, it's to your benefit," however, that oppressive need for control is now over. A Darksider mask covered Feng Yuan's face as violet flames erupted from her body. Out of the way, Cheng Yun watched in dismay. Feng Yuan was, if he wasn't mistaken, exuding pure dark element energy. Feng Yuan's feelings boiled over and the dark element surged in tandem as she recalled each instance in which Auntie insisted that blind obedience was the only option. Growing up, had Aunt at any point once asked what she needed? What did she want?
This recipe is so good, even an orc would approve. Give it a try and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Indeed, even Aunt, bold as she was, wouldn't even come close to moving toward Feng Yuan in the pains of an undeniable Darksider change. She basically saw from a protected distance, a look of miracle gradually spreading across her face. This was something worth being thankful for, a sign that Feng Yuan was tolerating her encouragement to reshape their relational peculiarity. Aunt gently measured Feng Yuan's cheek, the Darksider cover progressing dangerously fast. Cheng Yun realized he needed to move quickly. Forsaking his soil mask, he shouted out to Feng Yuan, asking she'd wake up before the dull component consumed her altogether. His voice must have punctured the obscurity of her psyche, the veil's spread floundered, if by some stroke of good luck briefly. Cheng Yun burned through no time willing the dissipated soil to reconstitute his body. As he did, he admitted that Luluo wasn't the only one he yearned to save. He needed to save his own waiting smidgens of humankind. Without that main thrust, that healthy identity, he never would have left the general well-being of his rambling region, never would have endangered life and appendage to come to their guide. By associating with ordinary, reasonable people, he'd have the option to stick to the remainders of his previous life. Furthermore, that was precisely why he would not allow Feng Yuan to turn into another void, strolling husk. Battered and broken as he was, Cheng Yun sent off himself at Ant with the remainder of his solidarity, hellbent on bringing her down. However, she lethargically lifted a hand to his face, exposing him to a point-clear impact of singing fire that desolated his generally destroyed structure. With his last ounce of force, Cheng Yun begged Feng Yuan not to lose herself. Regardless, she needed to keep in mind she was an amazing powerhouse, a human regardless of anything else. As his body disintegrated to clean, his words appeared to go about as smelling salts for Feng Yuan's blurred psyche. The sound of Cheng Yun dissolving into a heap of stones must have yanked Feng Yuan back to brutal reality. Step by step, blessedly, the Darksider cover started to retreat. She gazed at the remaining parts of the kid she'd come to consider a genuine companion, eyes overflowing with feeling. Feng Yin was completely dumbfounded, going to his auntie like a lost young man. Yet again Aunt confronted Feng Yuan, demanding that even in this exciting modern lifestyle, the laws of human achievement stayed unaltered. The way to significance was ascending to the highest point of your picked field, acquiring the appreciation and respect of all. That was Ant's definitive objective, to turn into a pioneer among pioneers, a sparkling signal for others to follow. To hold Feng Yuan back from going crazy, Ant consumed her legs to debris. To prevent her from going after her fantasies and revolting, she burned her arms. Then, at that point, on Ant's order, the swarm of flaring Darksiders held on to Feng Yuan, hauling her away from her goals both in a real sense and metaphorically. Feng Yuan passed out, just to wind up diving through an interminable void. There was no telling on the off chance that she'd at any point ended up in a seemingly impossible situation in this dreary, hopeless chasm. Ant's voice murmured in her ear, promising her the greatness she so lavishly merited. The multitude of Darksiders thoughtlessly parroted their chief's words. Ant guaranteed Feng Yuan that in the event that she essentially put her confidence in her auntie, everything would work out. The swarm applauded as one, a frightful reverberation of Ant's feeling. As she fell, Feng Yuan began to contemplate whether perhaps, quite possibly, Ant had a point. All things considered, take a gander at her sibling he'd turn into a crushing outcome according to the world, all because of following Ant's painstakingly laid plans. Sensibly, on the off chance that Feng Yuan strolled the way her auntie had cut out for her, what's the worst that could happen? However, where it counts, Feng Yuan knew her own reality. That immovable conviction tore her out of the interminable drop, the yawning abyss of nothingness. She yearned to go through the backwoods, to take off through the skies, unhampered and free. In her thought process, maybe her last minutes, she comprehended what she'd needed from the start. From the roasted stumps where her arms had been, from her consumed and cut-off legs, little hurricanes sprang to life. She broke liberated from the Darksider's grip, drifting out of sight, at long last unburdened. In the event that there was no space for banter among good and bad, the actual ideas were unimportant. Just the final product made a difference. Feng Yuan stood tall, the tornadoes disseminating as she drifted, her missing appendages re-established. Her brain was perfectly clear. On the ground, dispersed rocks quietly combined, framing a solitary eye. Through it, Cheng Yin saw Feng Yuan's change into a Darksider, a living encapsulation of the breeze. Once more Ant fixed her with an incensed glare for considering resisting her. There was nothing she disdained in excess of a rebellious mannequin. She sicced her military on Feng Yuan, requesting them to quiet her down and end her silly chattering. However, Feng Yuan remained completely quiet. Abruptly, everything fit properly. Darksiders, dull components, the force of change. Her comprehension developed huge amounts at a time. With her recently recovered arm, she invoked a little tornado. Then, with an intense descending press of her hand, she released a smashing downburst of air, pummeling the seeking after Darksiders to the ground. As Ant's feudal cronies thrashed defenselessly, Feng Yuan was simply getting everything rolling. The downburst gave way to a monstrous updraft, a seething twister that sent the flaring Darksiders going crazy. Indeed, even Cheng Yin's pitiful remaining parts were up to speed in the whirling vortex. Yet, inside the tornado, he saw something extraordinary. The dull components were uniting at a stunning rate. The breeze appeared to purge him of the devastating shortcoming abandoned by Ant's flares, permitting him to completely recover without any preparation. As his recently improved earthen body settled delicately on the ground, he hustled to Feng Yuan's side, frantic to be aware on the off chance that she was still sane. She streaked him that exemplary pompous smile underneath her Darksider veil, prodding that she could at last see his human face obviously. Much more weak-looking than she'd envisioned, she kidded. Cheng Yin couldn't resist the opportunity to grin as his own cover gradually spread. No standard Darksider could match Feng Yuan's marked snideness. She was still herself, point of fact. Ant, then again, was the farthest thing from assuage. Her multitude of mannequins, killed all at once? Inconceivable. Frantic to fight off the sting of rout, she released her full Darksider structure, persuaded she was saving Feng Yuan from turning into a waste of time like Cheng Yin. The team, rejoined and more grounded than at any other time, got a move on. Cheng Yin dissipated his earthen body, arguing for Feng Yuan's guide as he moved to contain Ant's flares. Involving himself as a living safeguard, he effectively impeded her furious burst. Painstakingly situated gaps permitted Feng Yuan to send off concentrated wind bursts, their powers joining to awesome impact. The assault constrained Ant back, overwhelming her irate fiery blaze. Inside her twirling jail of fire, Ant felt the singing misery. Her own casualties probably persevered as the heightened blast consumed her. Cheng Yin's hypothesis turned out as expected. This variety of fire freak involved its own body as fuel, consequently the weighty limitations on Ant's capacities. In spite of everything, Feng Yuan's heart throbbed for her auntie. She wanted to draw out her affliction, just to stop the hopelessness this catastrophe had fashioned. Cheng Yin gestured in grave understanding. This was a family matter, all things considered. Furthermore, the technique for obliterating a Darksider, he'd proactively shared that mystery. Knocking clench hands, the two Darksiders who some way or another gripped to their mankind united. With a strong joined punch, they pointed straight for Ant's face. The staggering blow broke her veil in a flash, wrecking her rule of dread. Ant collided with the substantial, squirming excruciatingly. Through her agony, she requested to know why Feng Yuan couldn't see that each and everything she'd done had been for her niece's own benefit. With the remainder of her solidarity, she went to Feng Qian, frantic for him to comprehend. All things considered, he was her highest accomplishment. Creeping terribly towards the specialist, she demanded that she alone had given him the ideal life. His prosperity was unquestionable verification that she'd continuously been correct. Her last desire, for Feng Qian to get back to her side. As a family, then everything would be okay. The specialist delayed, appearing to consider his auntie's supplication in fact. Feng Yuan quickly cautioned him not to pay attention to the beast cowering on the ground. That thing was not their auntie any longer, simply a derisive Darksider rambling its wound supremacist seas with its perishing breaths. A callous husk, without any human compassion. Yet, as Feng Yuan jumped on Ant's brutality, the specialist really wanted to see the glaring pietism. He went to his sister, requesting to realize what made her any not quite the same as the supposed beast. Her and Cheng Yin, they looked just as cruel as Ant. Feng Yuan floundered, speechless. However much she preferred not to just own it, Her sibling had a point. Tears gushed down Aunt's face as she affirmed that indeed, she had dedicated the most recent 20 years to raising them. The culpability of leaving her destroyed Feng Kaiyan. As her nephew, as a specialist, didn't he have an ethical constraint to facilitate her passing? How is it that he could reside with himself assuming he abandoned her to kick the bucket in this pitiable spot? In a snapshot of severe genuineness, Feng Yuan called her sibling a bonehead. Chang Yin immediately mediated before she could truly lay into him. Something wasn't adding up. They'd all seen Aunt change normal individuals into lesser Darksiders, so why hadn't she done likewise to Feng Kaiyan? It was anything but an issue of want. She was obviously unfit to do as such. Chang Yin thought it had to do with the kin's earlier openness to his own intrinsic dull component. In the event that he could set off transformations in those all around contacted by his power, might Aunt at any point do likewise? Aunt figured out how to creep sufficiently close to grasp at the specialist's feet, a good omen in her eyes. Essentially, he may as yet be prevailed upon. In any case, Chang Yin ran those expectations, demanding that the genuine Feng Kaiyan was no simple mannequin, following another person's lead. The entranced specialist held tight Chang all Yin's words, frantic to hear more. Chang Yin signaled to the costly vehicle with its folded bumper, the vehicle that had uncovered Feng Kaiyan's real essence. The garish model, the forceful driving, the resolute definitiveness as he cut down a large number of Darksider, everything highlighted one certain reality. This was not the way of behaving of some easygoing organization man, satisfied with his exhausting, normal presence. No, these were the activities of a man with an inner mind longing to break liberated from the enclosure of his own life. What's more, in Chang Yin's well-qualified assessment, the opportunity had arrived for the specialist to do precisely that. Little did Feng Kaiyan understand, Chang Yin's words and idiosyncrasies conveyed hints of dim component, blending with the torpid power previously flowing through the specialist's veins. In a shock, he disregarded his coat, hanging it over Aunt's quickly crumbling structure. His eyes cold and hard-hearted, he cautioned her explicitly, assuming she continued to consume her own life force, she'd basically stop existing. His last suggestion? Deal with herself for once. Aunt pulled back at the absolute absence of sympathy in her nephew's voice. Certainly this couldn't occur. The specialist rose to his feet, reviewing the region with a basic eye. They frantically required supplies and medication, however that wouldn't be an issue. He'd previously pinpointed their area, concealed in a close-by vehicle. He promised to abandon a few assets, all things considered. Aunt would require an outside fuel source now that her own body was forbidden. Hard of hearing to Aunt's anguished cries, Feng Kaiyan left, cutting off the harmful ties that had headed them for such a long time. He threw a commitment behind him to come visit again sometime in the future, however it rang out more like a danger than whatever else. Gracious, and she shouldn't for a second mess around with Feng Yuan. As her older sibling, he'd be taking incredible consideration of her from this point forward. Regardless of how wildly Aunt scrabbled and came to, he was at that point a long ways outside her ability to understand. Thus, the triplet made their getaway, their appropriated supplies close by. The specialist jumped in the driver's seat, sending any Darksider sufficiently silly to cross their way flying. Chang Yin's dull impact appeared to have imparted another feeling of resolve in the once uncertain man. Feng Yuan and Chang Yin selected to follow by walking, leveling up their newly discovered skills. However, Aunt as of now not concerned her, all things considered. Feng Yuan's powers would hold the pathetic lady forever under wraps. She really wanted to worry about her sibling's perspective. Exactly how precisely had Chang Yin treated him? The liable Chang Yin admitted to mirroring Aunt's change setting off strategies. He hadn't expected his moved predispositions superseding Feng Kaiyan's feelings so totally. Interfering with individuals' brains gave him a negative impression. In the event that the specialist couldn't track down it in that frame of mind to excuse him, Chang Yin would deal with the outcomes directly. Be that as it may, for the present, they had undeniably additional squeezing matters to take care of. Conveying Luluo's medication was their main concern. Leniently, they figured out how to get the antitoxins to her at the last possible second, with the special reward of Feng Qian's expert oversight. After an exhaustive test, the specialist verified that Luluo's condition had previously begun to get to the next level. The drug would just speed up her recuperation. Indeed, even in a most dire outcome imaginable, her chances of getting through were out of this world. Out of the blue, a memory floated through Cheng Yin's brain the day Luluo trusted in him about the profound feeling of safety she felt on his property. He went to Feng Qian, voice weighty with feeling. They couldn't stand to face even the smallest challenge with her life. Not at the present time, not ever. Out to lunch, Cheng Yin scarcely enlisted Feng Yuan blasting into the earth vault, encouraging him to come see something. She essentially hauled him out to the woods, a need to get going pushing her forward. What welcomed them was a scene of complete decimation, shriveled roots littering the ground, a solitary withered bloom remaining in a fruitless no-man's land. It was Honk, that awesome little blossom who'd been by Cheng Yin's side since the absolute starting point, presently mysteriously shriveled and squandered. Cheng Yin raced to his companion's side, frantic to know who or what might have caused such a horrendous destiny. With what little strength he had left, Honk guaranteed Cheng Yin that nobody was at fault. This was just the awful hand of nature at work, the inescapable end to the pattern of life. Cheng Yin's frenzy just developed. He was persuaded his abuse of dim components from far off had depleted unfortunate Honk dry. He madly proposed to bring each and every supplement and drop of dim component he had, anything to keep his fancy companion fit as a fiddle. Be that as it may, it was past the point of no return. The sun was at that point setting on Honk's brief yet gorgeous life. Despite death, all are feeble. Honk, humble plant however he was, experienced made harmony with his job in the unending dance of presence. The opportunity to consider such profound issues was an uncommon gift for one so little. As the fearless little blossom began to disintegrate away, he went to Cheng Yin with one last solicitation. Honk begged his dear companion to recall the obligation among them, and to reimburse it in the following life. Days after the fact, Luluo at last mixed from her fretful sleep. She sat up leisurely, loosening up the wrinkles and hurts that accompanied delayed bed rest. Arising out of the gritty vault, she detected the Feng Qin Yuan and Qian. With a splendid grin to match the beautiful day, Luluo welcomed her companions merrily. Feng Yuan, still a piece stressed, asked how she was feeling. Luluo fixed up, demanding her disease had been an all-out accident. Presently, she was the perfect example of wholeness and well-being. As a matter of fact, it was Feng Yuan who looked somewhat worn out. Luluo inclined in, contemplating whether her companion's worn-down appearance was because of worry about her condition. Feng Yuan giggled anxiously, forgetting about her anxiety. In all actuality, she was simply being mindful this entirety. Utilizing dim components to recuperate thing would take some becoming acclimated to. Luluo's consideration floated aside, arriving on an outsider. Indeed, not an all-out stranger. She'd seen photographs of Feng Qian previously, in a flash remembering him as Feng Yuan's more established sibling. Feng Yuan had referenced Luluo to him too. Yet, the one Luluo truly needed to see was Lai Cheng Yin, that intriguing Earth individual. She'd anticipated that he should be there when she awakened. At that exact second, Cheng Yin was roosted on a precipice's edge, lost in calm thought as he looked out over the ocean of trees beneath. He rehashed a weird mantra to himself, an update that he was unified with the land, that the pattern of life was certain. He was human. Laughing in the face of even the most dangerous situation. How is it that he could stay unaffected? However, even as he recited, questions sneaked in. Would it be advisable for him to stick to his humankind, to the ethics and convictions that had consistently directed him? Or, on the other hand, could embracing his new personality, his unity with the earth, make this more straightforward to bear? Before he could coincidentally find a response, Luluo crept up behind him, happily drenching him with cold water as a morning shot in the arm. Cheng Yin spun around, quickly frightened, then, at that point, overflowed with help at seeing her. Lu Luo smiled, prodding that he'd looked somewhat shriveled and could utilize the hydration. Cheng Yin just expressed gratitude toward her, his look relaxing as their eyes met. Lu Luo made a stride nearer, contemplating whether he'd been hanging out on this precipice with Honk to stay away from every other person. She never would have speculated the land and the blossom would become so close. Cheng Yin almost proclaimed the overwhelming news about Honk's end. However, he got himself. He faltered, uncertain in the event that he ought to break it to her. All things considered, Honk and Lu Luo had framed their own unique bond. The idiosyncratic little bloom had been similar to her very own pet for some time there. Eventually, all Cheng Yin could gather was an unclear statement of regret. He felt like he'd give Lu Luo down access a major way. She positioned her head, confounded by his secretive words. Regardless, she was chomping at the bit to return to deal with the ranch. Above all, she expected to get Honk's unique abilities. Cheng Yin attempted to tenderly make sense of that approaching Honk, for help wasn't a choice any longer. In any case, before he could find the right words, 3 blossoms abruptly grew at the bluff's edge. The impossible-to-miss plant, presently brandishing 3 unmistakable heads, promptly began ribbing Cheng Yin like bygone eras, calling him a horrible loafer. Cheng Yin basically jumped out of his skin as though he'd seen a phantom, which, taking into account he'd watched Honk shrivel away only hours prior, was somewhat close the imprint. Honk reproved him for shouting like a chicken liver, especially perfectly healthy. Hadn't he quite recently given Cheng Yin that enormous discourse about the circle of life? Presently he was here to gather on the obligation Cheng Yin owed him. Lu Luo hunkered down, affectionately stroking Honk's petals. His changes appeared to have advanced considerably further. It was getting increasingly hard to discern whether he was a beefed-up soybean or potato cross-breed of some sort or another. With her dependable colleague back in real life, Lu Luo was stimulated and prepared to compensate for some recent setbacks. Honk, then again, wasn't precisely excited at the possibility of difficult work. In any case, before they truly got serious, Cheng Yin required replies. What on God's green earth was happening with this strange bloom? Had he come back to life? However, he appeared to be more human-like than any time in recent memory. Honk considered the occasions paving the way to his demise. A bizarre memory surfaced, a debilitated Lu Luo coming to him, utilizing some sort of thick green fluid to water him. Inexplicably, Honk chose to remain quiet about this goodie. Better to sit back and watch how things worked out. As opposed to choose not to move on, the 3-headed bloom proposed Cheng Yin center around his new buddy. Befuddled, Cheng Yin checked the region for this purported companion. He might have been pointing excessively high. The little man was jabbing out of the soil, an inquisitive little radish with a face. Bespectacled and mild, he muttered to himself, wishing he'd recognized the admonition signs sooner, wishing he might have streamlined everybody's disparities. Right now, a talkative root vegetable was decent. Be that as it may, something put this fella aside. His thinking designs were quite more human than his timberland brethren. Captivated, Cheng Yin connected with Examine the murmuring radish all the more intently. In any case, before he could connect, a wild plant suddenly erupted, smacking his hand away as it screeched, "Save individuals." Cheng Yin drew back, alarmed however beginning to assemble the pieces. This plant character continued to demand he was the one in particular who could save everybody, and that his paw was the key. Terribly natural manner of speaking. No? Indeed, even the voice stimulated something in Cheng Yin's memory. However, what he was thinking it couldn't be imaginable. Could it? Out to lunch. He scarcely enlisted Feng Yuan's methodology. She'd come to research subsequent to recognizing a quite unshriveled Honk walking around with Lu Luo. Knowing Cheng Yin, she figured there must be a significantly more interesting circumstance unfurling. Feng Yuan crawled nearer, getting a quick look at the 2 peculiar plants sticking out of the earth. The radish was a wrecked record of self-fault, while the plant remained hellbent on saving the general population. In a moment, it clicked. Feng Yuan perceived these smallish plants as Qin Wen and Cheng Jun, the powerful team who joined her on that disastrous mission to safeguard Lu Luo. A confounded Cheng Yin asked how she'd eyed her companions so rapidly and certainly. Believe it or not, Feng Yuan couldn't exactly make sense of it by the same token. Call it a premonition, a resolute conviction from profound inside. From what Feng Yuan could accumulate, it seemed like Cheng Jun and Qin Wen's substances had some way or another been united onto these honest yields, birthing conscious plant life. Much more stunning, she detected an odd association. Similar to the plants were taking care of intel straightforwardly to her. With this newly discovered information, Feng Yuan acknowledged they could decisively put these folks as posts, an early admonition framework against foe dangers. In the event that the world had proactively seen plants fighting zombies, why not freaks versus Darksiders? Cheng Yin needed to concede it wasn't the most obviously terrible thought. This land had forever been a shelter for every single living thing. Presently, it could act as a hatchery for new life. However Cheng Jun and Qin Wen presently not strolled the earth in human structure, their interests, their wills, had combined with the very soil itself, transforming into something totally new. However long the obscuration kept on projecting its frightful light, these strange changes would endure. As opposed to getting impeded in an existential emergency, Cheng Yin perceived the significance of concentrating on the dull component and all its possible applications. In the beginning of the end of the world, he'd liked himself an exceptional element, hand-picked by the people pulling the strings to hold his humankind in an ocean of careless beasts. A solitary stronghold of judicious idea in a world gone distraught. Be that as it may, taking a gander at Qin Wen and Feng Yuan, it was clear Cheng Yin was no supernaturally named rescuer. Chances were, there were Darksiders out there who employed undeniably more power, held on to definitely more turned belief systems and tricky than they'd at any point experienced. One thing was sure eventually, they'd encounter a Darksider who made Cheng Yin seem to be a novice in the secretive craft of dim component control.
Hey guys, we've just wrapped up all the available chapters of this manhwa. Why not stick around and check out more of our videos? Just click on one of the thumbnails on the screen. There's always another great story waiting for you. Catch you all in the next episode.